Thanks, Bobby. I appreciate that intro. Yeah, my name is Tara. I am co-leader of the Southwest chapter of the Native Plant Society of New Jersey, and a member of the webinar committee. We are so happy to have Michele tonight. Michele Bakacs joined Rutgers Cooperative Extension in 2009 as a county agent slash associate professor serving Middlesex and Union counties. She specializes in thinking way too much about plants and is grateful to do so. I think we can all relate to that. Michele focuses on natural resource management and provides research-based education and assistance in the areas of invasive plant management, native plants, habitat conservation, sustainable landscaping, and water quality protection. Her favorite part of her job is being surrounded by dedicated volunteers and colleagues working together to protect the environment. Michele loves the woods, hiking with her family, eating chocolate, and traveling. And before I give it to Michele to take it away, I just want to let everybody know that if you have questions, don't put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A, and we'll address them at the end. Thanks. And with that, Michele, take it away.
Thank you, Tara. You can hear me okay? You can hear me okay, Tara?
Yeah, I can hear you. It looked like you froze up for 1 second, but you seem
Okay.
good now.
Okay, and the slides are good? You can see the slides?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I am a proud member of my local steering committee in Mercer County of the Native Plant Society. And we're going to be talking tonight about an important topic, invasive plants, that many of us deal with at home, and we deal with also on our natural lands. Just before we get into that, I just wanted to talk to you about what Rutgers Cooperative Extension is. That's where I work. I work for Rutgers Cooperative Extension. We are the outreach arm of Rutgers University, and we're part of the statewide system of land-grant universities. So if you're in Connecticut, it's UConn has UConn Cooperative Extension. If you're in Florida, it's University of Florida Cooperative Extension. We in New Jersey, Cooperative Extension is part of the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station, and we are a unique collaboration between the counties that we serve and the university. So I literally, when I go to work every day, I go to a county facility because it's that partnership between the university and the counties that make it work. Every county in the state has a Rutgers Cooperative Extension office. So if you are all the way up in North Jersey and Sussex County, you have a Rutgers Cooperative Extension office. And if you're all the way down in Salem County and South Jersey, you also have an extension office. And our mission is to help the diverse population of New Jersey adapt to a rapidly changing society and improve their lives and communities through an educational process that uses science-based knowledge. This is our website here, njas.rutgers.edu. You can check that out. And we have folks that work in commercial agriculture, environment and natural resources, fisheries and aquaculture, food, nutrition and health, home lawn and garden, and youth and community development. Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking about today. We'll talk about why invasive plants are a problem in New Jersey. We'll also talk about management of those invasive plants. So I know you guys, probably many of you came here tonight with a list of species that you have questions about, and we will do some of that towards the second half of the presentation. We'll all get into individual species, but mostly I want you guys to walk away with an approach of understanding how we use plant growth form, understanding plant growth form of plants. So whether or not a plant is an annual or a biennial or a perennial, or how does it spread? Does it spread by a rhizome? Does it spread by a seed? I want you to walk away understanding that, and so that you can better manage, more effectively manage these species using mechanical practices at the right time of the year, and hopefully reduce the use of herbicides. We'll talk about integrated vegetation management and early detection, rapid response. And then we'll get into some widespread and emerging plant species of concern. So some of the resources we have available at Rutgers, we have on the left, you see the invasive species of the month. So if you just do a search online for Rutgers invasive species of the month, you'll see those resources there, and that takes a deep dive into individual species, how to identify them, why they're a problem, and how to manage them. And then on the right here is a fact sheet that we have invasive plants and native alternatives for landscapes. And in that bulletin, there are tables and lists of, we have lists of invasive plants and then native alternatives that you can replace those plants with. So we'll dive right in, a little bit on definitions. So lots of discussion about language and invasive species. So let's just define our terms here. This is the federal definition of what an invasive species is. And I'm talking about all invasive species. So invasive mammals, fish, bugs, insects. An invasive species is considered to be one that is non-native to an ecosystem and whose introduction is likely to cause some sort of harm. So environmental harm or harm to human health or economic harm. So that's the federal definition of what an invasive, and you frequently see this definition in legislation, any sort of policy. Sometimes people will ask me, well, plants like poison ivy, that's harmful to humans, or there's other plants like, for example, greenbrier is also a very aggressive plant. But both of those species are native to New Jersey. So even though they are aggressive, and in the case of poison ivy, they cause some sort of harm, they're not considered to be invasive species. So it turns out invasive plants have shared characteristics that help them be successful in the landscape. So we'll go through these now. One is that invasive plants, they can easily multiply by means of seeds or runners or rhizomes. And sometimes they can multiply and spread by seeds and rhizomes. So they also have no competitors or diseases or predators that help keep their populations in check. They also have what's called high reproductive and dispersal rate and short generation time. What that really means is that they're live fast, die young kind of plants. So they grow very, very quickly and set seed and spread their seed, and then they die back. So think like garlic mustard, which is a biennial, right? And it sets seed and flower and seed in the second year, and then it completely dies back. They're also invasive plants are typically habitat generalists. And what that means is that they can grow in lots of different conditions. They can grow in wet areas. They can grow in dry areas. They can grow in sunny sites. They can grow in shady sites. So here we have some widespread invasive plants here. And let's see if this will work, Tara. If folks want to tell me what some of these species here are on the slides, maybe they can put it in the question section. So for example, this plant on the left here, what is this? What do you think, just by the picture, what do you think this is? If you want to go ahead and put it in the question section. This plant on the left, I can tell you it's a shrub. It has a white flower in the spring. It has thorns. Any guesses, Tara, on what this might be?
Yeah, we got a ton of people coming in with multiflora rose.
Yep, that's what it is. So this is an example of a plant that has different methods of spread. It spreads by seed, but it also can spread by its cane tips. So it has these canes that reach over and to the ground, and when the tips of the cane reach the ground, it can it can create a whole new plant. And then this one all the way on the right here, do folks know what that is? Same thing, you can put it in the questions. It has kind of a heart-shaped leaf here with a pointed tip, and you see these white seeds. Do folks know what this is?
I'm getting knotweed, silkgrass, mile a minute. Oh, wait, no, that's, oh, I think I just gave something away.
Yeah, yeah. So the one in that's okay. The one in the middle is mile a minute. This isn't this
Yeah, that's what people are coming
annual.
in with.
Yeah, so the one in the middle is an annual. It grows for 1 year and then sets seed and then dies back and puts out lots and lots of seed. And the one all the way on the right, somebody said it that yes, this is Japanese knotweed. This is
Yeah.
another one that has multiple means of spread, and it grows by rhizomes, but it also has some of the populations have viable seeds. So all of these plants here, they are aggressive and they can form monocultures because they have all these characteristics of they don't have competitors, nothing eats them, they grow very quickly, and they can grow in lots of different habitats. Okay, so other reasons why invasive plants are a problem in New Jersey. On the left here, we have an aerial photo, and this aerial photo shows, kind of what we've done in New Jersey, right? We've have lots of different land uses in New Jersey, and land use is quite literally the way the land is used. So this is showing here a forested area over here, and then here you have some farms, and in the upper right here, you have some suburban lots, like I think I see a pool there. And where we change land uses, we create edge habitat here. So you can see a lot of edge habitat along the forest here where we've opened up the interior of the forest, right? Here's some edge here, and that allows seed and plant propagules to move into the interior of the forest, and that's how one way that invasive plants spread. Do you know what else likes edge habitat? Do folks know what is another what is another reason that we have such a problem with invasive plants in New Jersey? And you can again put that in the questions. If you are guessing, I'll tell you that I almost hit one of these last week with my car.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of deer.
Deer, yes, yes. Deer are another reason that we have such a problem with the spread of invasive plants in New Jersey. So normal deer populations for healthy, sustainable deer populations should be somewhere between 10 and 20 deer per square mile. But in New Jersey, we have some communities that are upwards of 100 deer per square mile. So deer populations, as you know, in New Jersey have skyrocketed, and deer do not eat the invasive plants. They do not eat barberry. They do not eat stiltgrass, right? They do not eat burning bush. They do not eat Japanese knotweed. They eat the native plants. And there are so many deer that they eat a lot of the native plants, and that gives the invasive plants a competitive advantage. Okay, this is a very, very important thing for everyone to understand. And I would ask that everyone on this phone call should be talking to their local policymakers and municipalities about what is being done about deer management in New Jersey, because this is the Native Plant Society, right? We are also all very, very focused on creating native habitat and native spaces and healthy, sustainable spaces in New Jersey, but it is virtually impossible to do that with deer populations being what they are right now in New Jersey. So we have a real problem with invasive plants. I don't know if you've been in the woods. I know this talk is focused on managing invasive plants at home, but I want to show you, if you have not been in the forest or in some of our natural lands recently, that we have a big problem with invasive plants. This picture here, the entire understory is winged burning bush. So that's a horticultural plant, right, that is still sold, that has become invasive in our forests. That picture that I just, that picture that I just showed was in Crystal Lake Park in Bordentown, New Jersey, close to where I used to live. This is a picture from Wildwood Park in Metuchen, New Jersey. Also, the entire understory here is also winged burning bush. This is in Hunterdon County, a county park in Hunterdon County. The entire understory here is a monoculture of barberry, another invasive shrub in New Jersey. And then here, the entire understory, this is in the Watchung Reservation in Mountainside. The entire understory here is also Japanese barberry, monoculture of invasive shrubs that have outcompeted native plants here. Here is a picture of wisteria from Mountainside, New Jersey. So you can see the wisteria blooming in the spring has climbed up the tree. Wisteria is a very aggressive plant, and it climbs up trees, girdling them, and it can bring down an entire tree just from its weight. It also smothers the tree. Here you can see a picture of it here, climbing up the tree. And this is a picture of one of our volunteers from our strike team up in the Watchung Reservation, helping to remove wisteria, because this is not a time when we can afford to be losing established trees. It's very important that we be protecting our existing trees and our existing forests. Here it is along the 295 corridor, wisteria in Burlington County, New Jersey. Same thing along the corridor here, wisteria smothering trees along the highway. This is also in Burlington County. This is an entire understory here of English ivy, which is another horticultural plant that has escaped into our natural areas. And here, not only is it smothering native vegetation on the forest floor, but it's also climbing up these trees here. And English ivy is incredibly heavy and can take out a live tree when it grows up in. Here's also in the Watchung Reservation in Mountainside, jet bead, which is a horticultural plant that we don't see sold very much anymore. But it has a white flower in the spring, and then it has a jet black fruit later in the season. Okay, so I show you this because I want you to understand the impact that all of this has on biodiversity. First of all, invasive species, not just invasive plants, but invasive species across the country are a huge economic problem. In fact, it's been estimated that it's a $26 billion problem annually, every year. We are managing across the country invasive species to the tune of $26 billion. That, can you imagine what we could do with that money? So these invasive plants, when they move into an understory like this, a forest understory like this, and take over and form what's called a monoculture, they are reducing biodiversity and outcompeting native plants. And sometimes people will say to me, well, Michele, we really need these plants because the deer eat everything. And this is the only thing that can survive in these understories, with deer populations being what they are. But the problem with that is that it sort of ignores some fundamental ecological principles, which is the food web, right? Native plants support the food web, and the food web is very real. Our native wildlife, our native pollinators are supported by our native plants. So these invasive species here, the barberry, the burning bush, they outcompeted a whole host of native species that used to live in the understory. So dogwoods and viburnums and hazelnuts and hollies and cherries and herbaceous plants like beard tongues and goldenrods and asters and milkweeds that used to live in this space. All right. And these plants provided resources to wildlife throughout the year. So they provided a nectar source, they provided pollen, they provided food, they provided shelter at different times throughout the year. But what has happened here with these invasive plants is this is kind of the equivalent of going to the supermarket and there just being food in like October. I often teach our students this because both barberry and burning bush that you see in these pictures here, they both do have a fruit. In the fall, they have a fruit that birds do eat. But that is not the equivalent of providing resources to wildlife throughout their year with and having replaced all of these species that provide those resources. Okay, so now I often get asked how climate change is impacting invasive species. I'm sure you know that in the next 100 years, New Jersey's climate is predicted to change dramatically, right? and the Northeast is warming faster than other regions of the country. So we have a couple of issues of how that impacts invasive species. One, we have these range shifting species. So these are species that exist now, are invasive south of us, in states south of us, but are predicted to move and to migrate into New Jersey. So these are new species that are predicted to come up and we will have to deal with in New Jersey. And then also the species that we already have here, they can tolerate shorter, milder winters and longer summers. So they're going to be even more of a problem. So climate change brings pests to new areas, reduces trees' defenses to pests, and can alter how forests recover after pest disturbance. There's a lot that you can do here to prepare for this. Actually, my coworkers and I wrote an article. If you do a search for Earth Day Everyday newsletter, the Rutgers Earth Day Everyday newsletter, there's an article called No Air Conditioning for My Garden, Gardening in a Changing Climate. And what we did is that there's a tremendous amount of information out there about creating sustainable landscapes that can help survive and thrive in our changing climate. So what this article does is it summarizes a lot of those extension resources. So you can work on planning for ecosystems of the future, avoid monocultures, okay? No more tree, shrub, mulch, right? We have to all be moving away for that. And we have to aim for plant diversity, many different plant species, native plant species or non-invasive plants that can tolerate drought and with broad plant hardiness zones. Also work on improving soil health because soil is excellent at being a carbon sink, and also plant species that where you can conserve water and they do not need as much water in order to thrive. Okay, so just two examples of some species that have changed or possibly will change based on climate change. I talked about English ivy a little bit already. This is an example of a plant that we have seen change with our milder winters because English ivy flowers late in the season and then sets fruit late in the season, okay, in the fall. And historically, the seed of English ivy was not viable because our cold winters, it could not survive our cold winters. So if we saw English ivy growing in a forest, we would assume, oh, this used to be an old homestead, or maybe this was an old landscape that was planted because English ivy is spreading here. But now we're seeing English ivy pop up in the middle of the forest where no one ever lived. And that means that the seed is staying viable and birds and other animals are moving that seed around, and it's starting to take hold in our forests. Similarly, and I cannot believe I'm talking about this, but maybe some of you have heard of kudzu vine, Pueraria montana, also known as the vine that ate the South. If you've driven down 95 through like South Carolina and Georgia, this is the plant that you see growing all over the landscape there as far as you can see. We do have some populations in New Jersey that are being tracked by researchers of kudzu. We have them, and we are waiting to see because kudzu seed, kudzu fruit typically cannot, again, survive our cold winters. It needs mild winters above 40 degrees in order to thrive. But you know, our winters are changing and they're becoming warmer. So we're waiting to see whether or not we're going to have a kudzu problem in New Jersey. Okay, so hopefully many of you have heard of and are supporting the New Jersey Invasive Species Strike Team with the Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space. This is a statewide cooperative effort to prevent the spread of emerging invasive species across New Jersey. I would encourage you to look into volunteering with this organization. For example, you can join a strike team. I help to run the strike team up at the Watchung Reservation in Union County, right on their website. This is their website here. there's a list of strike teams across the state that you can join and you can help. You can also download their do not plant list, so that when you are shopping and you're buying new plants, you can cross-reference what you're looking at with their do not plant list to see whether or not you are looking to purchase for your landscape is considered to be invasive. While I'm here, I also, if there's anybody online with us who is a land steward, who if you work for your county or your municipality, or your local parks department or your local preserve, a shout out to you. I know this is a difficult time. Please know that you are seen, and I have enormous respect. The people who do this work right now, I would encourage everyone here to volunteer and reach out to your local land managers who are doing the hard work of managing invasive plants and our native habitats, because they need assistance. They need a lot of assistance. And I'd also encourage you to talk to local policymakers and make sure that they are getting the assistance, the staff, the funding that they need to continue to do this hard work in our local parks and our preserves. Okay, so we are, you may be wondering, well, what is going on at the state level to help manage invasive plants? I wanted to just say that the states around us, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, Connecticut, they all have some sort of invasive plant legislation. So for example, Delaware in 2021, they're, I think the most recent, adopted an invasive plant list, which had a ban on sale and a ban of cultivation on a whole bunch of invasive plants, including barberry, Callery pear, burning bush, lesser periwinkle, English ivy, a whole bunch of them. And then every state kind of does it a little bit differently, but you can look into how these different states manage invasive species. And then you might be already aware that there is this proposed New Jersey legislation, Senate Bill 1029, that has been proposed to establish a similar type of policies in New Jersey that would, in addition to establishing a New Jersey Invasive Species Council, it also has a list of species that would be banned for sale and cultivation. This is some of them. So from some trees that you might be familiar with, Norway maple, mimosa, Callery or Bradford pear, some shrubs, barberry, autumn olive, burning bush, European privet, Siebold's arrowwood viburnum. For barberry, there are some cultivar exemptions that would be allowed in the policy. And then there are some vines. There's an invasive clematis terniflora, English ivy, both wisterias, Wisteria floribunda and Wisteria sinensis. And then also in terms of grasses, there's silvergrass that was also on the list, but there are a couple of cultivar exemptions also for silvergrass or miscanthus. Okay, so you can look into that legislation if you're interested in that. So just a word about language. Note that some historically used common names may be considered culturally insensitive. And here in this presentation, I've listed alternative names, or in some cases, limited references to a country of origin. If this is something that you're interested in learning more about, there's a national discussion going on about this, the language that we use for outreach on invasive species. And this is a great article, Alien Language, What's in a Species Name, out of Michigan, Sea Grant, Michigan State University. There is a link here for it. And then also there's another great publication out of University of Florida called Standardized Invasive Species Terminology for Effective Outreach, which kind of defines some of the language that we use, what is a native versus invasive versus exotic, and which terms are kind of being phased out versus other terms. Okay, so now we're going to talk about control methods. And you may have heard of integrated pest management. Now we're going to be talking about integrated vegetation management, which is a set of principles used to address invasive plants problems. And I've kind of modified this for home gardeners and home landscapes. This is based on a Penn State extension publication called Integrated Forest Vegetation Management. Penn State has a lot of really great invasive plant resources. So when you approach your own home landscape, this is how I am encouraging you to think about management. It's a step-by-step kind of approach. The first thing that you're going to do is go outside, maybe with a cup of coffee or tea, and just map the location of undesirable plants on your property. You could, this is something that you should do no matter what. You should, on your property, just have a record of what plants are there. It can be your native plants, your non-native plants, and your invasive plants, and then put down your map of undesirable, put on your map where your undesirable plants are on your property that you would like to manage and control. And then you need to focus on learning their species names. What is it exactly that you have? Do you have stiltgrass? Do you have multiflora rose? And very, very important that you learn the plant growth form. You're going to hear me say this over and over again. What is the plant growth form of that particular species of invasive plants? How does it reproduce and how does it spread? Does it spread by seed? Does it spread by underground rhizomes? This is very important to know so you can effectively manage it at the right time of year. The next thing that you're going to determine is, as I said, control options, okay? You're going to determine based on that species and based on its plant growth form, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, what plant growth form means. Is it an annual? Is it a perennial? You're going to define what your goals are, your priorities, and your abilities. What are you able to do on your landscape? Are you not interested in using herbicides? Is that not something that you're comfortable with? Okay, that is fine. Then what are the best mechanical options for controlling that particular plant? What is the most effective mechanical option at the right time of year for you to control that plant? That's what you're going to research. And then you're going to take action. You're going to do your implementation. You're going to implement your control strategies. You're going to create a timeline, right? Because this doesn't have to be done all in one year. What are you going to do this year? What are you going to do next year? And what are you going to do the year after that? I would also encourage you to have a discussion with your partner or spouse or whoever that is, so that everybody's on the same page with how this is being done. All right. And you're going to use as many different, I'm going to discuss more of these integrated vegetation management strategies as is practical for you. And then you're going to evaluate. You are now a steward of your home landscape, okay? And you are going to evaluate, did this work? Did this management practice work? You're going to keep notes and you're going to make changes. So if you use one management strategy in the front of your property and one management strategy in the back of your property, you're going to write that down. So next year, you're not like trying to remember, wait, what did I do here? And what did I do there? So you want to treat this like a research project. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about plant growth form. This is another Penn State extension publication called How Plant Growth Form Affects Invasive Plant Management. As it turns out, there's an optimal time for management based on plant growth form. So do you have summer annuals on your property? And summer annuals are plants that live from spring to fall and reproduce only by seed. Sorry about that. So in green here, you can see this. So examples are stiltgrass, mylaminate, or Japanese hops. Or do you have creeping perennials? These are, again, herbaceous, which means non-woody plants that grow in patches and colonies and spread vegetatively and by seed. So do they spread underground through underground stems and underground roots? Okay, and then do they also spread by seed? That's important to know. So examples of these are Canada thistle, Japanese knotweed, orange daylily, lesser celandine, common reed for Phragmites, and mugwort. Those are all examples of plants that are creeping perennials. Or do you have woody plants like shrubs or trees that do not produce suckers? So for example, they don't send out shoots, okay, from underground rhizomes. These are single stemmed or clumping, multi-stemmed woody plants that produce new stems only from the stem tissue. Okay, so examples are Callery pear, Norway maple, European alder, shrub honeysuckle, and Japanese barberry. All right, so very important to know what is the plant growth form that you have so that we can effectively manage it. And I'm going to go through with you different examples of different plant growth forms and the best way to manage them at the right time of year. Okay, so look at this. This is an example property. It is actually my property. There's my house right there. It's an aerial photo of my house. There's my driveway right there. There's my neighbor's driveway with his 2 cars. And I wrote down the integrated vegetation management steps here: scouting, identifying, assessing, taking action, and evaluating. And so what I did exactly what I told you. I went around my property and made note of what invasive plants that I have. So in the backyard here, I have 2 annuals. I have Mile a Minute and I have Stiltgrass. That's over here. It's kind of on the border between my property and my neighbor's property. And then down here, I have Japanese knotweed, which is considered to be a creeping perennial. It spreads, it comes back every year after year. And then it spreads by underground rhizomes. Okay. It also can spread by seed. And then in the front of the property, I have a woody perennial that does not produce suckers, which is Callery pear. So I have a tree there. So far I've scouted and I've identified my species, and I still need to assess how I'm going to deal with this and how I'm going to take action, create a timeline, and evaluate. All right. But this is an example of on my own property, how I've mapped and determined what I have here. So next, you're going to assess your control options, and that's what we're going to talk about now: different integrated vegetation management strategies and methods. So the first one here, first method you can use is an ecological method. You can, and this works best where you have, if you're one of the lucky ones out there where you don't have high deer populations. Okay, so you don't have high deer pressure. You can allow nature to take its course, because native plants, when given the opportunity, actually do a great job competing with invasive plants. Did you know this? We know this from deer exclosures when on preserves and public spaces, when they've put up fencing to exclude deer. The native plants grow back and they do a great job competing with a lot of those invasive plants. So you can put in native plants or non-invasive plants to compete with these invasive plants. You can also, there are some aggressive natives that you can use, even some that are deer resistant, and I have another slide on that. Okay. Another thing that it's an option for a couple of species that we have in New Jersey is use of biocontrol agent. For example, an insect that has been released from the native range of that particular plant. So for example, in New Jersey, through the Philip Alampi lab, which is in Ewing, New Jersey, if you have Mile a Minute on your property, you can actually purchase the biocontrol, the insect that helps to control Mile a Minute. There's also a biocontrol for purple loosestrife and one for emerald ash borer, but I don't believe those 2 are available to the public. So these are biocontrol agents, insects that feed just on the invasive plants, and there has been extensive research that has been done before the release of these species. Then there are also mechanical controls. That's the physical removal of the plants or removal of the seed heads. So I'm talking now about mowing, cutting, pulling, or girdling plants in order to control them. One of the most, I should have put here as one of the tools, vigilance, persistence, because this is something that you typically have to do over and over and over again as a control strategy. And we'll talk about that. And then if you're comfortable using herbicides, then there are chemical herbicides that you can use to control invasive plants. And I forgot to bring up my pictures here. So just to go back, here's a picture of purple loosestrife. This is the biocontrol, the weevil that's released on purple loosestrife. That predator-prey relationship is real. This particular insect does a great job controlling purple loosestrife populations. So when purple loosestrife populations go up, the weevil populations go up to control it. Here is a great example of a mechanical control tool. This is a weed wrench, and that's Eric Gehring from the Middlesex County Parks Department, who uses that weed wrench. You're basically using leverage, and there's a clamp here on the bottom to pull out troublesome invasive shrubs like multiflora rose. So we'll talk a little bit about herbicide applications. There's foliar applications to the leaves, cut stump application. This is a picture of a cut stump application here where you're cutting really low to the ground, applying an herbicide just to the remaining stuff. That's a great focused way to use as little herbicide as possible, and it only impacts that particular plant. Okay, so here are some aggressive native plants that compete with low-growing invasives. So things like stilt grass or other low-growing species. There's Virginia cutgrass. There's jewelweed, although deer do eat jewelweed. The rest of these deer don't really eat deer tongue grass. Some of the ferns, sensitive fern, New York ferns, obedient plant, which is in the mint family. And if anybody has ever grown mint, you know that those can be very aggressive. And then Canada goldenrod, these are examples. So this picture here on the bottom is a picture of deer tongue grass. It can grow, 2-3 feet high, and it really helps to suppress and smother some of these invasive plants that are lower growing. So this is a strategy that you can use in your landscape to compete with some of these invasive plants. And then another approach that I want you to think about and take very, very seriously is what we call early detection rapid response. This is just a fancy way of saying, get them while they're young, okay? Pull them out while they are young. Learn to identify the invasive plants when they are in the seedling stage. And this image here, this figure was created by the great and powerful Jean Epiphan, who is my coworker from Morris County. She's a fellow county agent up in Morris County. And here she has a picture of porcelain berry, which is an invasive vine. And look, she's yoinked it out here, she says. So this is going to save her a lot of problems in the future by pulling it out when it's young, when she's first seeing it. Here's an ailanthus seedling, pulling that out when it's young. And here is a barberry in this picture here. This is a seedling found and removed. Okay, so this is a great strategy to learn to identify these species when they are young so that you can remove them. And then also, while you're at it, learn to identify the natives when they are young and help to protect them, okay, so that they can thrive. Okay, so now we'll get into specific species. We're going to go through a few widespread invasive and emerging species of concern by the different plant growth forms. So for chemical recommendations, remember that the label is the law if you're using an herbicide, and you need to follow all labeling and safety guidelines when applying pesticides. And for large infestations, if you're not comfortable using herbicides, consider hiring a professional with a state New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection pesticide applicator license. And hopefully some of the strategies that we'll talk about here, you will never have to, use an herbicide. There's some where you really do, and there's others where if you get it at the right time of the year, then you really shouldn't have to. So annuals, and again, remember that an annual is a plant that grows for 1 year and then sets seeds and then dies back. So Tara, if you could help me here again, folks, what is this species? If you guys could put your answers in the question box. This is obviously a grass. Here is a picture of the leaf up close. It has a lance-shaped leaf and its alternative along the margin with a shiny midrib that we also often call a racer's stripe. It produces a lot of seeds, 100 to 1,000 seeds per plant that stay viable for up to 3 years. Any ideas what this is?
Everybody's coming in with Japanese stiltgrass.
Stiltgrass, that's right. This is Microstegium viminium, or Japanese stiltgrass. So stiltgrass smothers native vegetation, right? Very difficult for a forester to regenerate when stiltgrass takes over. People have it as a problem in their yard. So this is a summer annual. And this is one where if you can get this particular species at the right time of year, it can be very, very effective management technique. Know that it sets seed in late August to September. Okay, so that means that the time of year that you should be controlling it, mowing it, weed whacking it, hand pulling it out is in August. Okay, so August, from like early August to Labor Day is the best time to be removing this particular species. And you can just pull it out. You can mow it. If you're able to mow it, you can weed whack it. The reason why is because it's late enough in the year where if a new plant emerges, it's not going to have time to set seeds before the winter. Okay, so timing is very, very important for this particular species, getting it at the right time of the year. I know a lot of people tell me that the way they control their stiltgrass is they just mow it all year round. And that is not effective. That is not effective. All you're doing is creating stiltgrass that is very, very short, okay? Below the mower blade, and that plant is still going to produce a seed. All right. So if you want to start removing the seed or exhausting the seed from the seed bank, then you have to wait to remove it. If you want to do any sort of chemical application, then this fact sheet here, Japanese stiltgrass control in the home landscape, has information about using pre-emergent or using a post-emergent before flowering when it is most effective. So you can look that out to see any chemical controls, but just know this is a great one for just controlling it mechanically without any type of chemical if you can get it at the right time of year. Okay, so our next type plant growth form is non-creeping perennials. These are herbaceous plants that grow in bunches, and they can be multi-stemmed, and they grow by seed, but they don't spread by underground rhizomes. So this is one example here, and Tara, I need your help again. If folks want to guess what this is a very, very tall grass. Many people have it in their landscape. It has a huge inflorescence that starts to come out later in the season, typically in like August. It grows very, very tall, taller than me. There's lots and lots of different cultivars of it. Here is an example of it having invaded a meadow on the left, and on the right, it's along the right of way. I took this picture on my way to work. So Tara,
I'm getting a
this
variety of
is,
answers now. I'm getting Phragmites, Miscanthus, silvergrass, pampas grass,
yeah, that's so it is. It's miscanthus. It's silvergrass.
Miscanthus. All right.
This is silvergrass. It's Miscanthus sinensis, which is an emerging species of concern in New Jersey, right? So things like multiflora rose, barberry, they are already widespread, but there are some that are emerging as a concern. This is one of them. It prefers full sun. It establishes from seed and invades roadside edges, old fields, disturbed site. This is a map in green showing where it is a problem, and you can see it's a big problem in New Jersey. It's also highly flammable when it's dry in the winter, and this is a picture of it on the lower right being removed by a park ranger from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Okay, so that's an example of a non-creeping perennial. There are many others. For example, purple loosestrife is another one. So for these particular plants, one, you need vigilance. That's a tool that's in your toolbox. Okay, this is not just a one and done type of thing. You're going to be focusing on cutting the seed heads to reduce the seed bank. Okay, so you need to cut this before it goes to seed. And you're going to cut it as low to the ground as possible, because what your focus is on now is trying to reduce that clump. If anybody who has silvergrass knows, it has a very deep root system that is very difficult to dig out. So the more that you can cut it, the better it is for helping to remove this mechanically. Okay, so that's what your focus is, over and over again, mowing it and cutting it back over and over and over again. So that's one method for just doing it mechanically. It takes a long time. It may be over many years. If you want to combine this with a chemical control, you can do that. And what I encourage you to do is what's called a pre-treatment cut. So this is what the integrated approach, where you're combining both mechanical and chemical. So again, you're still cutting it over and over again, and then to reduce the amount of foliage. And if you can reduce the amount of foliage, then you need much less herbicide. So what you would do, you would do a foliar spray in August to September, after you've reduced just the size of the plant, really, with something, for example, like glyphosate would help to get into the root system to kill this plant. And doing a pre-treatment cut goes a long way to reducing the size of the plant, so you have to use very, very little herbicide. Okay, now we're going to talk about creeping perennials. These are kind of our hardest plants to control. Think mugwort. Okay, that's an example of a creeping perennial. It has an underground rhizome. It's herbaceous, so that means that it's non-woody, and it spreads vegetatively and by seed, and it grows in large colonies. These are very, very difficult to control. So an example of a creeping perennial is one that probably you all know well, Renutria japonica. I'm still not used to that name because it's changed so many times. This is Japanese knotweed. So some pictures here of knotweed. Here is the leaf. It has a squared off leaf here, and then a point, kind of looks heart shaped until you have this squared off base. And then also it grows in these hollow cane-like stems. And here's some examples of it here. And also it grows in clumps. So here's a clump, and this clump is connected to this clump, and this is connected to this clump, and they're all connected by this underground, very deep root system. And then it also has, at times the seed can also be viable. Okay, so look at these pictures here. This is the crown or the rhizome. It has an extensive root system. And a rhizome just means that there are underground horizontal roots. And this picture on the right here, you can see that root system. This is a cross-section of Japanese knotweed rhizomes. Look how many of them there are. Okay, look how many lateral roots there are here. So here's the crown, and these are all the spreading rhizomes going to spread a whole nother grow a whole nother clump. I mention this because it's very important to understand that any fragment of the rhizome left in the ground will produce a new clonal plant. And once cut, the cut piece, okay, so if you cut down Japanese knotweed and leave it on the ground, that cut piece will sprout, as well as the remaining plant. It can produce new shoots also. So this is a very aggressive plant, very difficult to control. So your goal when controlling something like knotweed or mugwort or some of these other plants, Aurelia, tree of heaven, ailanthus, all of these plants produce shoots, underground stems and shoots, and spread clonally. Your goal is to eliminate the rhizome system. And this can take many, many years. The case of Japanese knotweed, it can take at least 2 years, at least. Probably more. Again, vigilance is a tool here. Persistence is a tool, going back over and over again. So mechanical control, this is one where really a combination of mechanical and chemical controls is what is most effective. You can get away with just a mechanical control only for very small populations. And what you're doing is you're repeatedly cutting the knotweed over and over again and digging out the root system, being careful to remove all of the rhizomes. And this is risky because any rhizome fragment left in the ground can re-sprout. This is a picture here of a young knotweed sprout from rhizomes that were left in the ground. Again, the cut plants will re-sprout. So when you cut them, when you cut the live material, you have to put them down on black plastic or cardboard so that it can dry out in the sun so that it won't reroot. Okay, so that's really just for small populations. You would do this over and over again until you exhaust the rhizomes. For very large populations, then you would want to combine a mechanical and chemical approach. So what you would do is you would do a pre-treatment cut in June. So now is the time to be cutting back knotweed all the way to the ground to reduce foliage and ultimately reduce the amount of herbicide that you would use. What you're doing is you're forcing, when you cut it back, all of these species, when you cut it back, you're forcing the energy reserves towards resprouting. Okay, so you're forcing it not to put energy into underground rhizomes, but instead you're putting it, the plant is being forced to put its energy reserves towards new leaves and new stems. And then you're going to wait at least 8 weeks. That's an important time period. It's important because if you do it too soon, then that herbicide won't be effective for getting into the rhizome. And then you're going to foliar spray the leaves from August to September, and it should be much shorter, a much smaller plant, so that you're reducing your use of herbicides, which is what we want. And then you're going to do this year after year to exhaust the root system, and you're going to monitor and treat for regrowth. Okay. So now we're going to talk about woody species that do not produce suckers from roots, and they sprout from the stem tissue only. Okay, so you're probably familiar with many of these. But one that you may not realize is starting to become a real problem in our region. So plants in this category are things like barberry, burning bush, privet, linden viburnum, all fall into this category. But one that you might not be aware of is a problem is a butterfly bush. So this is a big problem out west. You can see from this picture here in Oregon, Washington, and California. This is considered to be a very aggressive invasive plant. And now we're starting to see it pop up in New Jersey. It's emerging, stage 1, highly threatening to natives. It establishes from seed or stem fragments. Okay, and it invades disturbed sites and riparian areas. It has a great big beautiful flower, right, that butterflies of course love. It provides a nectar source for butterflies. But I also want you to know that while this plant does support adult butterflies and does provide food for adult butterflies, it provides no resources for the caterpillar stage. So hopefully you all remember that butterflies have 2 life stages. They have the caterpillar stage, the baby stage, and then they have the adult stage, which is the butterfly stage. So the butterfly can get nectar from this plant, but the babies cannot get anything from this plant. Okay, they cannot use it as a resource. They cannot eat its leaves. So if you must have butterfly bush in the landscape, then it's very important that you also be planting native species around it that can support the larval stage, the caterpillar stage of the butterflies. Okay, so control methods for these types of plants, these are non-suckering woody species like burning bush and privet, shrub honeysuckle, autumn olive, Norway maple, multiflora rose, although multiflora rose does root at the tip. Make sure to learn to recognize these species when they are young and control small population. But this is another group where mechanical control, you get really, really good results just from mechanical control. So your first step with these species is to stop the seed production. So remove the entire plant, cut it as low as humanly possible, as low as you can get it, just from stopping it from going to seed. And then repeatedly, year after year, you're going to be damaging that plant. You're going to be cutting it, girdling it, mowing it, shredding it, doing something to exhaust its energy reserves. Okay? So if you can do that, you can have really, really good control options with these particular species. There are, of course, you can, of course, use herbicides if you want. This is one where if you're going to cut it back, you could do a cut stump application that would just target the roots of that particular plant. do basal bark application, but just know you can get really good results with this particular group of plants just by doing mechanical control. And I think the last one that I'm going to be talking about are climbing perennial vines. Okay, this is kind of like, I don't know, these are my favorite group. I feel I get a lot of catharsis out of managing this particular group. An example of a climbing perennial vine is Akebia quinnata, or chocolate vine, also known as five-leafed Akebia. And this is considered an emerging stage 2 plant. It's an emerging species of concern. It invades forests, climbs and smothers trees and shrubs. This is a great picture of it here on the right. Well, actually, let's look at the leaves. So if you're not familiar with the leaf, it does have these palmate-shaped leaves, right? Palmate meaning it emerges from a central point. The leaflets emerge from a central point here. And it's kind of a light greenish leaf, and it has these beautiful purple flowers here, which is why it is sold commercially. But then this is a picture from Hartshorn Woods, and you can look at this website, monmouthcountyparks.com. They have a great website showing how they work to control this particular species. They had a big infestation. So visit that website to learn more. Another one that is a climbing perennial vine is winter creeper. Many people are familiar with this, have this in their landscapes as a ground cover, Euonymus fortunei. I'm seeing a lot more of this. This is a picture of it here by where I live, Washington Crossing State Park. It is a semi-evergreen, has an evergreen leaf that stays persistent on the stem throughout the winter. So if it's green, it can photosynthesize. So that gives it a competitive advantage in the winter. It's photosynthesizing and it's growing. And then it also has a fruit that is spread by birds. This is what it looks like. It has this bright red. It has a pink capsule and has this. The fruit has a red coat. It is spread by seeds, and check out this vine, how thick that vine is climbing up this tree. Okay, so control methods for climbing perennial vines. Again, learn to recognize this species when it's young so that you can pull it out before it becomes a problem. You can use mechanical controls on this. Remove the root whenever you can on climbing perennial vines, but you can also use a method. You could use loppers or saws to create what's called a window cut. So you're going to cut it the vine as low to the ground as possible, and then high, so that you're removing a section of the vine. And then you're going to let the biomass, all of the plant above, that's climbing up the tree, you're just going to let that die off. You're not going to pull that down. It's going to die on its own. This is a great winter activity, especially for something like winter creeper or English ivy that you can see. And if you have an infestation on the ground, then this is something that it can be repeatedly mowed. This is also a great species for combining using an integrated approach. So using your mechanical controls with a chemical application, for example, a foliar spray late in the season when everything else is dormant on these leaves like this on the ground goes a long way to controlling this particular species. Okay, so there is a lot that you can do. There was supposed to be a title here saying, what can you do when it comes to the invasive plant problems? This is what you can do. Talk to your municipality, as I said earlier, about deer management, what they're doing for reducing deer populations. Support science-based state and local policies for invasive plant management. Support your local land managers. Join a local strike team. Help your local counties, municipalities, your local preserves, your local watershed organizations with invasive plants. Download the Do Not Plant list. Tell others about it and use it when you go shopping. Understand that plants do not know boundaries. Okay, sometimes people say to me, well, I don't see it spreading in my yard and I don't see it spreading in the landscape, but that does not mean that it's not quietly invading a nearby forest. And then learn and use alternatives to invasive plants. if you are a professional, if you're with us, if you're a landscaper, make sure to be educating your clientele and providing them with non-invasive options if they are asking for one of these invasive plants. Here is a list of resources that we can make sure to get out for you for identification purposes. There are apps that you can use. Some of our favorites are iNaturalist and Picture This, because you want to accurately identify the plants that you have. There are some online books like Plant Invaders of Mid-Atlantic Natural Areas. Here are some websites and organizations, and here's some extension resources, including some really good ones. This is from UConn, University of Connecticut, Managing Invasive Plants at Home, and University of New Hampshire, Mechanical Controls of Terrestrial Invasive Plants, that I thought were particularly good. So I'm happy to take questions, but if you would not mind filling out an evaluation for me, this is, I work at Rutgers, and we're constantly evaluating everything that we do. So if you wouldn't mind, it's very short evaluation. Hopefully Tara can put this, or maybe Mike can put the link to this into the chat or wherever, so that people can have access to that evaluation. And that's it. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Michelle. That was so awesome. That
Thank you.
was all actionable information. We have a ton of questions that are kind of all over the place. I think one that's easy to answer is that, will you be making copies of these slides available?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Then one of us, the Native Plant Society, will put that up for you guys, because I had a question about that. We have a lot of questions, oh my goodness, about like individual plants, like plants that individual people are dealing with.
Right.
Like, I have one about creeping Charlie, bittersweet. Um, oh, let's see. I know I saw a few others, but I mean, anything on those two?
So bittersweet is a perennial vine. It's similar to wisteria or English ivy. So you would take the same type of approach. So very important you can use that window cut approach, where you're cutting it low to the ground and then above, and then letting the above ground growth up the tree die off. And then as much of the root as you can remove is a good thing. If you have the ability to mow the bittersweet over and over again, that is great. And if you have a larger stem, then that's a good one for cut stump applications. But there's some information from Penn State that with perennial vines, they don't always respond very well to that cut stump application, just because there is such a large underground root system. You might do better to do like a foliar spray later in the season when other things are dormant.
There are a couple questions about bamboo. I hate bamboo.
Yeah, bamboo. That's on the list. That's one of the ones that potentially might be banned at the state level.
Mhm.
Bamboo is obviously a huge problem. It does have a thick underground root system. So this is one that's kind of interesting. It doesn't produce a seed, so it's going to be a problem where it is. It's a problem for neighbors, for example, but it's not going to jump the road, but is going to spread where it is, because it has such an aggressive underground root system. This is one where you're going to throw as much as possible at it. If you can work to cut down those canes as low to the ground, that is a very good thing. And then for folks that I know who have been, I actually saw a talk about this recently done by a professional. And what they said that they do is that they go to every hollow cane that exists on that particular colony, and they are filling it up with an herbicide to help kill the underground root system. The only other way that I have seen to be successful is literally bringing in a bulldozer and scraping out the rhizomes. So the best thing to do is to never plant bamboo.
I agree. I agree. Um, Oh, there's so many questions about individual plants.
Right,
Let's
right.
do
But
lesser celandine,
yeah,
celandine.
yes. And I also want to mention, if we don't get these today, folks are welcome to email me with individual questions about problematic species, and I can provide them with resources. So lesser celandine is another one of these species that there is a specific time of year that you have to go after it. So for those of you who don't know, lesser celandine grows. It's an ephemeral. It is a non-native ephemeral. It's an invasive. Grows in April. It's one of the first plants to emerge in the spring. It has an underground tuber, okay, and it spreads by that tuber, like for example potatoes. If you have a small population of it, then you need to remove that entire underground system of tubers before it spreads. And this particular species, one year you could have a small population, and the next year it could be 10 times the size. It grows very, very quickly. So you have to get at it. In terms of an herbicide application, which is a very effective way to treat this, there's a small window of opportunity in the early spring before it's in full flower where you would do a foliar application.
All right, let's switch to fauna for a minute. There was a question about what individual, what are municipalities doing to control the deer population? David was saying, I don't think that, oh, did it disappear? Oh, wait, he doesn't think that culling is terribly successful in Essex County. What are elected officials open to and to ways and try to control deer? Um, yeah, what have you seen that is effective?
We have some great models in New Jersey for
Yeah.
effective deer management. Duke Farms has a great model. Rutgers Eco Preserve is a great model. New Jersey Conservation Foundation is doing work on this. Actually, Essex County, I feel like I've heard good things about also. Those are some of the models that we can look to in New Jersey for effective deer management. And it really takes a regional approach. It can't be done by municipality, by individual municipality, because obviously deer move, so it really needs a regional approach to be doing deer management. And it also takes people talking to their policymakers and telling them that this is something that is important to them and they want to see happen.
We have a few questions about applying chemicals
Yeah.
near streams or waterways, and how do you prevent that kind of contamination? Somebody was asking about what if they have knotweed growing near a stream.
Yes, yes. And so this is why reading the label is so important. Is I have my pesticide license, and that's one of the basic tenets when you take your applicator test and study for that exam, is understanding that the label is the law, and the label will have information about whether or not it's an aquatic safe herbicide and if you can use it near water.
Somebody has a question about, is there an optimal timeline for applying glyphosate after cutting the stump for woody invasives? Should you do it immediately, or is there a better time of year?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So when doing a cut stump application, you want to apply the herbicide immediately, right away, not do it tomorrow, not, wait a couple of hours. You want to do it immediately, so that, that plant will absorb it into its root system. The second part of that question is also very important. Know that there are certain species that you can do cut stump application much of the year. Certain shrubs, you want to kind of avoid the leaf out season. You want to avoid like the spring where they're pushing out their juices, they're pushing out leaves. That's not a great time to do cut stump, but the rest of the year, even over the winter, is a good time. And there's a couple of species, Aurelia, Ailanthus, that just don't do well with cut stump application.
I have a question from Rita about using 35% acid vinegar. And is there a reason she shouldn't use that? And it helps to control the Virginia creeper and poison ivy in her yard, but I'm just curious about that too, because I think a lot of people see vinegar, like they don't want to use like a chemical, but they'll see
Right.
vinegar and be
Yeah,
like, oh, that's in my kitchen. I can just use that. But
yeah.
what do you think? Because I've gotten into that way of thinking too.
Yeah, so I can't really make off-label recommendations for
Mm,
things like vinegar and stuff like that. There are you know, organic herbicides that can be used, but just know for a lot of them, typically what they're doing is they're not like systemic. They're just kind of burning the leaf and taking off the top growth basically, but they're not necessarily getting into the root.
okay. Let's jump back to an individual plant that people are having a problem with because I see a number of people have mentioned periwinkle.
Okay.
What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
I think that I have a problem with it too.
Yeah.
So this is another one that it's a perennial, vine and ground cover. It is a some from a control standpoint. The best thing that I can say about it is that it does stay green in the winter. So when nothing else is out, you have your English ivy, you have your periwinkle, and those are great times of that is a great time of year to go after these species. I have had some luck with periwinkle where I had a small population of it where I did mow it really really low, grow it to the ground, and put cardboard on top of it. Again, this is a very small, discrete population, low to the ground, was able to take off all the leaves, put cardboard on it, and then put mulch on top and let it sit there through the winter. And it did take care of that periwinkle. But over the years, little populations have survived, and I see it coming back and kind of resprouting and spreading. So this is one where you could take that approach, and then anything that survives, you could do a late season kind of herbicide application to get at any remaining. I'm always looking for strategies for reduce our use of herbicides, and that would be one to take kind of an integrated approach.
Okay. And this is a question that I was thinking of myself I think it was when you were talking about Japanese knotweed. There's a question here about when you cut these invasives back, how do you dispose of them properly so they don't like sprout up in your municipal compost pile or, whatever.
Yeah, which is a problem, by the way. That is a real issue. So like I had said earlier, for the knotweed, for example, anything that you remove, any above ground plant that you remove, or even the rhizome that you remove, you do need to lay out. You do need to lay out somewhere in the sun and cook it. You know,
Mm.
um, and you so so that will help reduce its size. um if you have a small population of it, you can just bag it and you know uh send it to the landfill, for example. But if you have a large quantity of it, then you would lay it out to dry so that you would reduce its size, and the water would evaporate, and you're really killing it off. But right, you don't want to be composting any of these species.
All right. Let's see. This is an interesting question. Because I think it gets to an interesting issue, even though the question is specifically about white mulberry trees. But Nathan was asking that he has a million white mulberry trees popping out everywhere. he tries to pull them, and sometimes uses herbicide. I'm slowly winning. Um, but he's confused about how they spread so fast because none of these trees near me actually produce fruit. Do they spread via seed or from the fruit? And how are I mean, I guess just generally how I experience that in my yard too, where I'm just like, where is it birds? Like, where are these
Yeah.
little seedlings coming from if they're not
Right,
anywhere here?
right. Yeah, mulberry does produce a fruit. And it's often spread by seeds, and their droppings will spread that particular plant. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, ooh, are there invasive plants that are deliberately planted for cooking purposes? Like, are there crops of invasive plants that like how does that work?
So there is a movement, and I can't remember her name right now, but there is an individual who has a company who forages for invasive plants that are edible, and then markets them to restaurants. So for example, garlic mustard when it's young is edible. Even knotweed when it's a small sapling, people do forage for it, and then they kind of cook it like asparagus. Um, as far as anyone purposely planting these for the primary purpose of eating them, I haven't heard a whole lot about that. But that's a great way to get the word out about invasive plants and encourage people to use them. I have read some articles about this, and sometimes the ecology is kind of confused about what the issues are with invasive plants. So I encourage everyone to eat invasive plants. That's a good thing. When the
So
ones that are edible, at least.
that's a good tip. That's a good tip. I know that we're going to be wrapping it up in a second or two, but we'll do one question, maybe two. This is a good question too. I think about this myself. Are aggressive natives always better than invasives?
So the issue with many of our invasive plants is that very few of them support our local food webs. Few of them, there's very few of them support any type of caterpillar. For example, we all have learned through the work of Doug Tallamy, for example, and his lab, how important caterpillars are and insects are forming the base of the food web, right? So sustaining the rest of the food web. And most of these invasive plants just do not do that. So whereas our native plants have evolved as part of our local ecosystems, and there are things that they have uh, specific species specific relationships with wildlife, with pollinators, with caterpillars. Their flower supports bees and other organisms. So for the most part, yes. Because when you're planting native plants, you're very often helping to support the food web.
All right, somebody jumped in and said that the author that you might be thinking about is Tama Matsuoka Wong, Eating
Yeah,
Invasives.
right. Thank you
Okay, cool.
for
That's
that.
jumping back to what we were talking about eating invasive
Right.
plants. But okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think let's do one more. How about how to manage Phragmites?
Um, so Phragmites is another one of these creeping perennials, in the same class as, for example, a knotweed, a Japanese knotweed. So this is a plant that has a very aggressive underground rhizome system. And it takes years to control these populations. So this is a similar type of approach where if you have a small population of it, you want to be cutting it back as much as possible to exhaust those rhizomes, to exhaust that underground root system and just try to force it to put energy back into creating leaves. Um, so that's an mechanical approach to it. And then if you want to use an integrated approach with chemicals, then you would cut it early in the season, cut it back as low as possible, possibly even twice, let it resprout, and then do a late season foliar spray so that you can get at those underground rhizomes.
Yeah, because I just have just seen that explode over the last decade or so. It's kind of depressing to see it everywhere. But I think we are out of time, and you've been amazing, Michelle. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
this. I can tell, like, by the amount of questions that I didn't get to, we have a lot of people that are concerned about this topic. So huge interest in this. Really appreciate you and your time. And yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell everybody while you still have their attention?
Well, if folks could fill out this evaluation, that would be wonderful. That would go a long way to helping me and providing me with feedback on other things that they'd like to learn. And also, I truly do mean it. This is an issue that we all need to be working on, and we need to be talking with our public officials about, and supporting our local land managers who are dealing with this issue.
Oh, and you know what? Before I say goodbye, I will say that the Senate Bill 1029 did pass the Senate, and it's going to go to the Assembly Commerce, Economic Growth, or I think an Ag Committee. They just redid the names of the committees. But yeah, since it passed the Senate, it is going, it is moving, it has legs. So just wanted to put that out there so people know that New Jersey does have a New Jersey or an invasive species bill that is moving through the system.
Okay.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Michelle, so much. This has been awesome, and hope everybody has. Oh, I guess I think our next program or our next webinar isn't until the end of the summer. So hope everybody has a great summer.
September.
September. Thank you, Bobby. And that'll be it. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.